Hello, this is Unsung, and in today's video we're going to be doing a matchup chart for Samira. We're going to be doing this in the tier list format to make this very understandable and easy to digest for you, and we are also doing this in alphabetical order, starting with AD carries and then moving on to supports. So quick disclaimer, this is going to be in the guise of like a high elo matchup. I'm going to kind of touch on like an elo to elo basis later on, but for most of these matchups this is going to be of course with a higher elo bias. So this assumes that your opponent is going to be somewhat competent on these champions and able to actually play them decently well. So let's go ahead and get started off with Aphelios. Aphelios is a champ that actually does give Samira a hard time. When Aphelios does have access to the sniper rifle, he has a 650 auto attack range. This is very bad for Samira to try and deal with. And while Aphelios doesn't actually have an escape, he has plenty of ways to catch you or to duel you. Gravitum is incredibly oppressive to play against as Samira. Because Aphelios' sniper rifle has a 650 range and its Q is basically double that, it's very easy for Aphelios to catch you out with Gravitum, it's very easy for him to duel you with a red gun, and especially when he has red plus white pairing, it's basically impossible to try and catch him out of position because he will just delete you. So you can actually win wall his chakrams, and before 12.5 it would delete them. I'm fairly certain that it still does. I haven't really had the opportunity to play this matchup a whole lot recently, but normally when you win wall these chakrams, they do actually get deleted. This is definitely in the hard but winnable category, right? Because Aphelios, even though he is very strong, does have weak periods in the game. He is not that great as his first item, but you know, he of course does outscale you like most other champions in the game. Aphelios is very strong if he does have the correct support. If he has something like a Lulu that makes it very hard for you to get on top of him, this is a terrible matchup, but this is definitely winnable. Next up we have Ashe, and this is actually one of Samira's harder matchups as well. This is definitely a winnable matchup if you're able to W every single arrow, but basically outside of that, she is going to destroy your team with the sheer amount of utility that she has. Ashe is very safe with her W cooldown being somewhere in the realm of 4 to 2 seconds, depending on what build she does. There are some people that play caster Ashe AD carry, you know, the ARAM build, or there are other people that just built her as a traditional carry. Once again, like the Aphelios matchup, she doesn't automatically win the lane like some of our other opponents, but this is a very hard matchup if she does know how to play it. Ashe can actually force you to use your W with her sheer amount of DPS and then use her ulti on you point blank, which makes this matchup basically unwinnable if she is somewhat intelligent. But as with most bot lane matchups, this does teeter on the quality of her support. If Ashe has a weaker support or a worse support player, then this is not the hardest of matchups, but this does get pretty bad when she does have a good support. So this is definitely in the hard but winnable category. This is not the end of the world, but it's definitely difficult, especially if the Ashe knows how to use her range against you. Caitlyn is kind of in the same boat. I actually think that this is an even matchup personally. As long as you're able to dodge traps and if you W her net, it's very simple. But she does of course have the advantage of having such a long auto range at 650 like Aphelios. So while Caitlyn is a champion that is very good at poking you, even if she does have an amazing support, you can generally get a couple of kills on her in the lane phase. There are two important things to note in the Caitlyn matchup. First and foremost, Caitlyn has no inbuilt sustain, right? And that she always has to push the wave. That's like the first thing. So there are two very important things to remember in the Caitlyn matchup. First and foremost, Caitlyn usually goes Gale Force or Kraken Slayer, right? This means that she has 0 sustain from early shield bow. 0 sustain usually means that Caitlyn will actually get poked out unless she's smart and takes fleet footwork. Most Caitlyn players take lethal tempo. Second, your E cooldown is on a slightly lower cooldown than Caitlyn's E cooldown. This means that you can actually dash up the wave and start trading with Caitlyn, and she's not able to really shrug off harass like you are. Samira builds early Vamp Scepter. Samira takes Bloodline and usually has some sort of engaged support. So when you're playing Samira into Caitlyn, even with an enchanter, you always have sustain advantage. This means that even though Caitlyn is very oppressive during the lane phase of the game, you're actually able to poke her out with Q. As long as you're able to poke her out with Q and avoid her own Q's harass and not step on any traps, you do have a winning lane. There are two common positions where Caitlyn will actually place her traps. It'll be to the side of tower and directly behind tower. Depending on your camera angle, these traps will be out of vision. As long as you know about these, this matchup is absolute cake. You can all in her incredibly easily. Once she does end up eating away from you, as long as you W her net, you're going to 100% of the time be able to catch up to her due to your passive. Caitlyn matchup, in my opinion, is actually not that bad. So I would consider this even. Draven, on the other hand, is actually a pretty hard, but this matchup teeters in like 3 different tiers. Depending on the skill of the Draven player, this can be unplayable, this can be very hard but winnable, or it can be even if the Draven sucks. So Most Draven players run Lethal Tempo. Lethal Tempo is actually very scary when you're playing Samira, because the additional range that your opponents get mean that they get to orb walk you, right? They get to space you with their auto attack. So you're not able to auto attack them, but they're able to auto you. So there are a couple of different Draven playstyles. Some of them go Halo Blades, some of them go Press the Attack, and some of them go Lethal Tempo. Lethal Tempo is the most common, and it's also the most difficult to play against, right? This would be an unplayable tier if the Draven player was halfway decent, but most Draven players absolutely suck. So, in the Draven matchup, it's really important that you go ahead and use your W on his axes. His axes are all of his damage. Draven does not have any ability damage aside from his Q axes, right? When they're empowered and he's spinning them and he throws them at you and they bounce back off. As long as you W these axes, if you can catch both of them and delete them, this matchup is not that bad. It's actually in the even tier. However, a smart Draven player is simply going to auto attack you, and then they're going to continue auto attacking you until you go in on them. And then they're going to hit their W, run away, regain their spacing with Lethal Tempo, and then keep throwing axes at you. Even if you win wall a single axe, the Draven player will usually have another axe available if they're intelligent at the game, and then be able to chase you down with their E. So this matchup is anywhere from unplayable to even. I like to put this in the hard but winnable category because I don't really mind playing in this matchup per se. It's kind of annoying, and it definitely snowballs out of control when the Draven player, has like a competent support or they play really well. A Draven can single-handedly shut you down, and Draven is also incredibly good into basically every support that Samira likes. Draven can E Rel out of her W, Draven can E Nautilus out of his hook, Draven can basically just like peel for himself incredibly easy. If you do not W his E or his axes, you're going to get completely and utterly shit on in this matchup, and it makes it quite difficult. So in my opinion, this is in the hard but winnable category for the majority of matchups, but this can go anywhere from unplayable to even depending on the Draven's skill. Next up, we have Ezreal, and this is actually one of the most common Samira counter picks, especially in high elo, and the reason for this is that he's safe. Ezreal is incredibly safe, and he's able to pump damage. He scales really well, he has a bunch of escapes, and he can harass Samira from an incredibly long range that most other carries don't. However, what makes Ezreal balanced is the fact that you can actually jump on him. So, Ezreal matchup, in my opinion, is one that is even depending on what your support is. This can be very hard but winnable, or this can even be a smashable matchup, depending on how you play it. But for the most part, this matchup is quite even. Ezreal does have 50 auto range on Samira, so even Ezreal can bully Samira out of lane, and his Q is incredibly strong. The way that you kind of mitigate how Ezreal plays this matchup is by always being proactive. Ezreal's E cooldown is like almost 30 seconds at rank 1, so your E cooldown is much lower, and Ezreal also doesn't itemize any sustain, so you're able to bully him out, right? You have to be proactive, you harass him whenever you can, you stand behind your creeps when you can't harass him, and you constantly try to force his E so he's always in a bad spot. Ezreal is one of those champions that as soon as they get 3 items, if they're an item ahead of you, the game is pretty much over, but you can keep him behind and even kill him over and over and over again in lane. It doesn't matter if you have an enchanter, it doesn't matter if you have a Nautilus or a Rel, you can put him behind single-handedly as long as you know what you're doing. There are 2 different playstyles for Ezreal, Press the Attack and First Strike. The Press the Attack Ezreal rune page is actually terrifying to deal with. Ezreal will outduel you at level 2 and level 3 if he runs Press the Attack. However, the First Strike rune page absolutely sucks into Samira because you're able to proc it with your Q, right? As long as you do it intelligently. So, when you force Ezreal's E, it's very easy to go in on him. If he has Press the Attack, you have to be careful of the level 2 and the level 3 because he will beat you 100% of the time unless he massively misplays. But this is a scaling matchup and this makes it not so bad. He can't really harass you out too bad because his Q needs to go through creeps, and then on top of that, his auto range is 550, so it's not like it's the Caitlyn matchup where he's autoing you from half the lane away. In my opinion, this is an even matchup that basically tilts to the favor of whoever gets the most amount of kills during the lane phase. If you snowball during lane, Ezreal can't do anything. This is a very easy matchup. If he snowballs in the lane, then this is a very bad matchup for you. This brings us to our next champ, which is going to be Jhin. Jhin is a very common Samira counterpick for 2 reasons. First and foremost, Jhin is very safe. Even though he only has an auto range of 550, he does actually have a bunch of things that make him very good in the Samira matchup. He has his Q, which is basically impossible to outshove as Samira. You basically lose lane priority on the first wave because Jhin will simply Q the first 3 creeps and thus get a push in onto you. This means that Jhin takes control of the lane and actually will have an XP advantage for the majority of it. And the other reason why he's a common Samira counterpick is because his W actually goes through your W. This is only the case with Samira's wall. Jin's W can actually tag two things. It doesn't only hit one thing. If you have two champions that are sitting, basically touching each other, and one of them has an extended hitbox, something like Braum Shield will actually destroy Jin's W, and Yasuo's Wall also destroys Jin W. Samira, for some reason, does not. Samira has one of the only walls in the game that doesn't have like any interaction with Jin's W. Jin's W goes straight through it. So as a champion like Samira, whenever you get hit by CC, you're basically going to be dead. So the Jin matchup is something that is very interesting because it's very oppressive when he's able to get ahead, but he's also incredibly weak when you set him behind because he doesn't have any escape. He's very safe because he gets movement speed from his crits, of course, and he's able to push the wave and thus make you not able to go in on him, but he's also very weak once you do end up getting him behind. If you kill Jin once or twice, this is actually not a bad matchup in the slightest, but if Jin doesn't get punished adequately, this is a terrible, terrible matchup, which is why I'm going to put it in even. Next up, we have Jinx. So, in my opinion, Jinx is actually a pretty bad matchup for Samira. This is a pretty hard matchup, and this is hard for the same reasons that the Jin matchup is hard, in that Jinx is very safe, she's able to push the wave, and she has great disengage tools, right? When you are chasing a Jinx and she shoots her W at you, you kind of have to wall it, but you also have to wall her chompers at the same time, right? But when we wall Jinx's chompers, they actually don't get deleted like they do for most other win walls. Samira actually just knocks them down on the ground, so they just fall flat right in front of where your W is landing, right? This is useful for you because you can walk around them, but they're still there. So this matchup, in my opinion, is kind of hard. Jinx is able to use her Q on the wave and push the wave at basically every stage of the game. This means that she can actually have an XP advantage over you, and the supports that Jinx usually has are quite difficult for Samira to deal with. If Jinx snowballs, or if you go in and you're unable to get a reset and then Jinx gets a reset on one of your members, you are a sitting duck and you're going to die. This matchup is honestly really hard when most Jinx players play it appropriately. However, after the nerfs to her base HP, this is a very snowbally matchup if you're able to get a lead in it, right? Because Jinx doesn't have an escape, she's able to completely and utterly just get deleted from the face of the planet, but when she's ahead, this matchup is really tough. As far as lanes go, this is definitely one of the harder matchups, unless you have an engaged support that's constantly able to engage on her, in which case this is disgustingly easy. But from my experience, this is one of the harder matchups. A lot of Jinx players know how to make the most out of lethal tempo plus their rockets, and thus just put you on an 800 range tether that you can never get out of. This is one of the most infuriating matchups that I've ever had the misfortune of playing on Samira, and it gets really terrible if you actually don't know what you're doing, especially if the Jinx player is competent. So now that we talked about Jinx, let's go ahead and move on to Kai'Sa. This lane is piss easy, in my opinion. Kai'Sa's Q is very telegraphed. The same thing with her W. If you use your W in either one of these, you duel her. She can never come and assassinate you because you just completely and utterly dismantle her with exhaust. There's only one annoying thing about this matchup, and it's that Kai'Sa's Q executes minions, which really isn't that big of a deal, depending on like what kind of support you have. Kai'Sa is something that is like strong-ish into Samira when she gets a lead, but you can generally duel her 9 times out of 10, depending on what your like build is and if you take exhaust. Kai'Sa doesn't go Immortal Shield Bow, Samira does. You have a little bit of an HP buffer there, even though Kai'Sa snowballs really hard with like Kraken and Phantom Dancer. Basically, the only thing that she has in this matchup is the fact that her Q executes creeps and that she can push faster than you. Really not that big of a deal. This matchup is cake as long as you W her Q or her W. Either or, it doesn't really matter. If you fight Kai'Sa, you need to make sure that you're fighting her inside your minions, that way the damage from her Q is split. Kai'Sa is something that is very burst tradey. She wants burst trades in the early game, and she kind of sucks in extended fights. She doesn't have the damage output as most other AD carries because she still runs Halo Blades, you know. So this matchup is actually quite simple. You simply just W her Q or her W, and you usually come out on top of this. Even in like a 2v2 scenario. This matchup is just incredibly cake if you're able to play it correctly. Okay, now we have our first unplayable matchup. Kalista is probably Samira's hardest matchup. In my opinion, this matchup is abysmal. Kalista is something that is very strong into you. She completely and utterly dismantles everything that you want to do. If you get on her, she will jump backwards and dodge your melee Q unless you time it right. And even if you wait for your melee Q, chances are she's going to sidestep that range Q too. This matchup is terrible because she beats you in all-in, she's able to kite you, she has lethal tempo, which is basically like one of the most scary runes that you could ever face as Samira, and she is a bully. So, Samira is a snowball champion, right? You need to snowball. But Kalista kind of makes it so that way you can't snowball because you can't kill her support, right? The second you're able to kill the support, she's going to pull them out with her ultimate and then just like chase you down while throwing spears into you and then rending you for 500 million damage. This matchup is absolutely terrible. Kalista out harasses you, she out pushes you, she out shoves you, she out bullies you, and she definitely beats you in kill pressure. This is one of the worst matchups. Even after the Kalista nerfs in 12.15, this matchup is still completely and utterly abysmal. This matchup is pain. I would ban this champion if she had a higher play rate. Thankfully, she really isn't played that much, but if you are in queue with the Kalista one trick, I would highly recommend that you ban this champion. This is the most unwinnable Samira matchup that has ever existed. Kalista is hands down the most terrifying champion to face. It's not even close. There are some other bad matchups out there. This is one of the worst of them. So in high elo, people play Karthus Bot Lane all the time. This matchup is hard, but it's definitely winnable. Karthus is something that wants you to kill him, right? So if you kill him, you just get blown up, but Karthus can actually be set behind. And even though he does shove the wave and he's really scary and he runs exhaust, this matchup is something that you can definitely manage depending on how you play the lane. Karthus is kind of weak to jungle ganks, and because you are Samira, he's going to want to push into you. This means that you can set up ganks against him and get him killed early game. If you are a Samira player and you're looking for a Samira counterpick, then I highly recommend that you pick up Karthus, especially as an AP source of damage. This champion is incredibly slept on in the bot lane. Karthus actually has insane stats in the bot lane. As you can see here, this champion's win rate is really high. In Platinum Plus, he's the fourth highest win rate champion in the game, and this is like insane because it only goes up the higher you go. Karthus bot lane is really scary, especially with the Dark Harvest page. The first strike page isn't that bad, but Karthus bot lane is actually like one of my least favorite matchups, but it's definitely winnable, right? This isn't just a matchup where it's completely unfair like the Kalista matchup. It's just a bad matchup, but it's definitely winnable. If you ever play this matchup, you need to make sure that you're sidestepping the queue, and then it's really not that bad. Alrighty, next up we have Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw is definitely in the Smash category. Even Lulu Cog can't compete with exhaust, right? If you have a Nautilus or a Leona and Kog'Maw is forced to run cleanse against it, you simply take exhaust into him, you wait for your support to go in and stun him. Once the stun has been cleansed or it's over, you just drop your exhaust directly on Kog'Maw and then he's unable to participate. This matchup is very easy for Samira. You simply wait his W cooldown. As soon as Kog's W is down, you're actually able to just all-in him and poke him and trade him, do whatever you want. Most Kog'Maw players rush Blade of the Ruin King. This isn't as strong as a completed Mythic in terms of like all-in power. It's definitely stronger over an extended fight, but it's not as strong in a straight-up head-to-head stat check all-in. Samira actually has the advantage in this matchup. Kog'Maw doesn't really have a way to push the wave. His only useful spell is his W, and he's very reliant on his support. So if you simply just use your W correctly in this matchup, it is incredibly easy, and you're able to snowball out of control in this matchup. Now, if you watch my streams or you watch my content, you know that I ban this in every single game, and it is not because Lucian is a problem character. It's because of the interaction that Lucian has with enchanters. Lucian is the only snowballing, like all-in AD carry, that is completely, utterly unable to destroy your support every single time they so much as look at him. I don't ban Lucian because Lucian's good into Samira, I ban Lucian because Lucian's good into your support. Lucian Nami is the most unfun lane to play against in the entire game. This is just an unplayable lane because your support will die 15 times and you cannot do anything to stop it, because if you try to go in and kill Lucian, he will simply kill you too. So, in my opinion, when Lucian is by himself, this is actually a smash matchup. You simply just W his double shot, and it's very simple. Lucian has the same auto range as you, he has better wave clear than you, but he does have to expend a lot of mana, and he actually is pretty weak to all-in. If you're able to exhaust Lucian after you don't have a W, when your W is down and you've W'd that first double shot, this matchup's actually really easy. But what makes this matchup unplayable is his interactions with enchanters. Lucian Lulu, Lucian Nami, Lucian Janna. All of these champions make Lucian into one of the scariest AD carries to ever play against because your support's going to die a million times. If Lucian is simply by himself though, and he's like with an engaged support or something, this matchup is incredibly easy. The only thing that you have to worry about in this matchup really is if the Lucian is smart, he'll engage on you with his R to burn your W, and then he'll gun you down. But most Lucian players don't actually do this. Even in like Grandmaster, I don't really have problems with this champion, aside from when he's paired with like some degenerate enchanter like Nami or Lulu or Janna. Then this matchup is very hard. It's in the unplayable tier, but for the most part, this is a smash matchup. You simply just run him over. Now, next up, we have MF. This is, I think this matchup's even. A lot of people disagree with me on this one, and think that MF is like this fantastic counter to Samira. MF has no escape, her damage is low, and if, you know, you're playing in a bot lane with, like, even supports, Samira is actually able to do a lot in this lane. If MF goes to EU, you simply just E in on her, and then you win the trade. If she tries to use double up off the creeps and you get hit, you're standing in the wrong spot. Really not that big of a deal. MF, in my opinion, is not that bad of a matchup at all. She's very manageable to deal with, and then on top of that, she doesn't really scale the greatest anymore after her lethality build has been kind of nerfed. So, in my opinion, the MF matchup is even though she has a bunch of poke on you in the lane phase. You know, if she goes Comet, then she doesn't scale. If she goes Lethal Tempo or Press the Attack, then you simply outduel her. If you have a CC support, you just engage on her over and over and over again. This matchup really isn't that bad. Very simple, in my opinion. Okay, we have another unplayable matchup here. Neela is actually so insanely strong into Samira, but not because of how she fights you in a 1v1 duel. Neela is strong because she always has XP lead on you, and when Neela is paired with an enchanter or something like that, you literally cannot kill her. Neela will out-stat ball you, she will out-stat check you, and she will out-shove you at all stages of the game. The only hope that you have on this matchup is ganks. You need your jungler to come and gank for you, but to do it properly and to not gank while you're level 2 and Neela is level 3, this matchup is absolutely unbearable. People are kind of like catching on and using this as a Samira counterpick now. This is definitely like one of the worst counterpicks in the game. This matchup is incredibly unplayable when the Neela player knows how to play it, and it's purely just because she always has an XP lead on you, and she has perfect tools to deal with yours. You dash away, she ease onto you. You try to kite her with her Q, she catches you with her Q. You go in on her and you try to get melee autos down, she W's it. You try to use your ulti, she ults you back. This matchup is terrible. It's so unbelievably unbearable, and this is definitely the second hardest matchup in my opinion after Kalista. This champion is so unbearably strong into Samira, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Because she can go Door and Shield Second Wind and have like a Peel Enchanter, this matchup is just abysmal. Worst like bot lane matchup in the game when played correctly, even more so than Kalista. Kalista is always good. Neela is like situationally good, depending on how good the player is at playing it. But yeah, these two are insanely oppressive and insanely strong against Samira. These are definitely the two worst matchups in my opinion, so you need to make sure that you're looking out for these. Now, next up, we have Samira matchup for my normal game players. This is an even matchup, of course. Basically, this lane is dictated by who is like the better player. Skill matchup, unless, you know, supports or unless one has like a Rel and the other one has like, you know, a Yuumi. Basically, the better Samira will always win. But, you know, this is kind of irrelevant in terms of ranked, so we're going to move on. Now, next up for Seraphine. This is an unplayable matchup. Seraphine just does everything that Samira hates. She permanently wave clears. She's incredibly safe. She has amazing ways to shut you down. She can run exhaust. Seraphine is definitely one of the harder matchups in the game. I'm so glad that this champion is nerfed, but I am incredibly pissed that she is still as strong as she is. Seraphine did get very heavily nerfed, but let's go ahead and see just how much these nerfs mattered. So, Seraphine is still the second highest win rate bot lane champion in the game. Her nerfs to her didn't really do anything to fix her problem. In higher elo, people will counterpick it and they'll pick like hard engage and will freeze the wave to try and deal with it, but Seraphine will always outscale you after 2 items. She is very hard to itemize against because she deals magic damage DPS. She has incredibly long range. She is very oppressive when played correctly. And as a champion, Seraphine in the bot lane is just very toxic to play against. She doesn't allow you to actually interact with her. She will simply just clear the wave and then hyperscale, and then you have to try to out-teamfight her, which is incredibly difficult when you are playing Samira into her. This is an unplayable tier for me because she simply always has pressure over the wave. She always has utility when she joins her team for teamfights, and she can constantly shut you down from 2 screens away. Just a terrible, miserable champion to play against. As Samira, you can use your W on her R, but basically you're not going to have your W every single time that you're going to absolutely need it to block her R. So this matchup is just terrible in my opinion, and definitely one of the worst Samira matchups. So now that we covered Seraphine, let's go ahead and move on to Sivir. Sivir as a champion is something that people think Samira struggles against all the time. In my stream, I'm constantly asked, Unsung, how do you deal with Sivir? How do you deal with this champion? She just clears the wave and then she kills you over and over and over again. She outscales you, like she's just better in teamfight. I think that this matchup is piss easy personally. So the reason why this matchup is so easy to me is that Sivir's wave clear is tied to projectile, right? Whenever she throws her Q, you can W it. Whenever she uses her W, you can W it. And she's also 500 range, just like you. So Most Sivir players are going to be interacting with the wave, right? They're always going to want to be hitting the wave. You as Samira can actually use this to your advantage. Because Sivir's range is the same as like the ranged creep that goes in auto attacks from the backline, you can actually dash in on this, get a free stack of style, and then auto Q her. And then Sivir can't run away from you. When you're in Sivir's face, she can't do anything because she has to throw her projectile Q that's like all of her damage into your face. You just wall it. As long as you know how to play this lane and as long as you know how to interact with her, this is like a dog walk. This is just a cake matchup. Even though she does shove you under tower constantly and she is really annoying and she does outscale you, this matchup in the lane phase is very easy to play once you know how to abuse it. You simply E onto the range creep that she's autoing next to. This will give you a stack of style. You'll always be able to all in her, and she can't like stat check you. Sivir is something that requires like a long sustained fight. It doesn't matter if she gets that sustained fight when she starts the fight and she's already half HP because you get in on her. You can EQ off the creep too, so that way you can EQ auto W and you get 4 stacks of style right there. It's very easy to chase her down, and Sivir also cannot deal with exhaust, so if you run exhaust in this matchup, it's just super cake. If you're having trouble in this matchup, I do actually have a YouTube video in my Unranked to Challenger series that shows how to play this matchup appropriately. It's very easy once you get the hang of it, and I actually love it when the enemy team drafts Sivir personally, even in like higher elo games, even if she's going to be getting camped, because I know that I can always draw her to his side lane and then beat her in that 1v1. It's really not that big of a deal. Now we have Botlane Swain. Swain is something that has actually kind of lost popularity without actually losing strength at all. Swain is kind of in this weird spot where he is very strong into Samira, but if you know how to play it correctly, it's not that big of a deal. His early game is pretty weak, but post 6, this champion just completely dominates. He is so incredibly strong, and you need to win wall his ulti explosion, otherwise you just get one shot. So while the Swain matchup is really difficult, if he's able to like play it correctly and he knows his weaknesses and when he's not going to be the strongest during the lane, this matchup is very difficult, but it is definitely winnable. Swain, of course, outpressures you with his Q. He's able to wave clear. If he ever catches you with an E, you're basically doomed. You can W his E when he's in his ulti and it makes him useless, so you're able to like go in and actually all in him. And then your ulti damage actually does out DPS his healing that he gets. But this is still like a very hard matchup, right? Especially if he has a peel support or something like Leona. This matchup is just incredibly difficult. Thankfully, Swain's play rate really isn't that high right now, and a lot of people, are kind of swapping back to traditional like hyperscaling AD carries. Especially with Sivir being strong, Sivir does do a decent job into Swain. She simply just E's his E, so it negates all of his pressure. So, all of that is basically pushing Swain's play rate down, meaning that we don't have to play against it, which is fantastic. But this is definitely on the hard side of matchups. Tristana as a champion is something that is definitely okay into Samira, and once again, this is another one of those champions that kind of fluctuates in what it does. There are, 2 different playstyles for Tristana. You can go Halo Blades or you can go Lethal Tempo. Lethal Tempo Trist is much scarier than Halo Blades, but a lot of Trist players are kind of weird with what they do, and they'll jump in directly on top of you. Simply, all you do in this matchup is you will wait for Trist to jump in on you, then you'll use your W to try and block her bomb. If you're unable to block the bomb, your W will still block her auto attacks, and then you just exhaust her. Even though the bomb detonates, she'll have to disengage, and then you can, of course, E after her while she's starting her jump animation and catch her, or you just win the stat check. So, in my opinion, this matchup is actually pretty easy. A lot of people don't like this matchup and would put it, somewhere in this hard but winnable tier. I don't feel this at all. I think that this is a smashing matchup. Depending on your support, of course, this matchup goes from like being really easy to really hard. It's basically like every single Samira matchup known to man, but I do think that this matchup is quite Samira-sided. Because you can W her E, which removes another one of her escapes and all of her damage, and you can also W her ulti when she's trying to disengage away from you. So if you're able to jump on her, you win the stat check every single time. She has to run away. But if she jumps in on you, you still win the stat check 9 times out of 10, depending on how you end up playing it. So exhaust is a must in this matchup, and this matchup really isn't that bad once you get the hang of it. Now, next up we have Twitch. This is going to be definitely in the hard but winnable category. Twitch does everything that Samira wants to do, but from stealth. So Twitch is very scary to fight as Samira because of a few reasons, right? Twitch takes lethal tempo. Twitch builds Blade of the Ruin King, which steals your movement speed, and Twitch also has one of the highest, longest auto ranges in the entire game thanks to his ultimate. If you ever get stuck in a side lane against Twitch, you are going to die. This matchup is definitely unbearable if Twitch is able to get to his first item uncontested, especially if he goes the Blade build. He's just going to steal your movement speed and run you down, or run away from you, depending on like what's what. The only counterplay to this matchup is flashing in on him. If you flash and you EQ and you get your style stacks, then it's okay. But if the Twitch is smart, then he'll flash your flash, and then you're back to square one where he's just, shooting you from 1200 range. And this is just absolutely one of the worst matchups in the game if Twitch is able to get items. But Twitch has to get to that point, and Samira is actually pretty strong in lane, especially if you have an engaged support. So in this matchup, it's really important that you actually W his W so he's unable to slow you. Twitch has no escape, and he's only really scary if he gets ahead or if you're even. This is definitely one of the scarier matchups that Samira has, because Twitch in an even lane definitely goes into unplayable tier, because this champ just will come and permanently assassinate you and then outscale you, and then once he's done with you, he just goes and rips your team to shreds, right? So this is definitely in the hard but winnable tier. This champ is just very annoying to deal with. He has a lot of tools for going and picking you. He runs exhaust himself, so even if you get on him, he just completely dismantles you, and then he's very prolific at team fights. So in my opinion, this is in the hard but winnable tier. This is probably one of the harder matchups for Samira, because you simply can't punish Twitch with the choice of support that he gets most of the time, and the fact that he takes exhaust. It's very scary to try and all-in him, because if you ever mess up an all-in, he simply just kills you in return, and that makes this matchup incredibly scary. So let's move on to Varus. Varus is a smash lane. Varus doesn't do anything. He has a long auto range, but he doesn't have an escape. He doesn't have the DPS threat of Twitch. His ultimate isn't as good. You can simply wall it on reaction every single time, and his Q is borderline useless against you. Because Varus doesn't have an escape, he is reliant on stat checking you down and trading you with lethal tempo. This is not something that's viable for Varus, for the same reason that it's not good on Kog'maw. You simply just all on him, and he can't really deal with it because he just doesn't have the damage output to fight you, right? As long as you're able to W Varus' ulti, it's really not that bad of a matchup. It's incredibly easy. Just make sure that you're not all-inning him after he takes down a cannon creep or something. Always make sure that when you are all-inning him, he doesn't have his passive stacked. If you're able to pressure him off of a minion so he doesn't get the last hit, then you have a perfect all-in opportunity against him. Always fight him when his passive is down, and you just roll over this champion when you play it correctly. Now let's go ahead and move on to Vayne. A lot of people really hate this Vayne matchup, and they would put it here. I think this matchup is even. I think that Vayne does not really do super well into Samira for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, Vayne relies on her stealth for mitigating damage, right? Samira has an AoE ulti that doesn't care about stealth. As long as you're able to get your ulti off, you will shoot her in her stealth, meaning that Vayne actually can't duel you. Vayne does go lethal tempo, which is very scary, and she does have a nice kill pattern. However, Vayne has to beat the aggressor in this matchup to actually get any foothold against Samira. So, as long as you're able to E in onto her and you know what Condemn's animation looks like, you can win this matchup every single time by simply Wing the Condemn. If she ever goes into her ulti, then you just turn on your R next to a creep or something, and then you'll be able to shoot her the entire time. She can't really kite you as well as other AD carries. She's really good at chasing you down, and she has a decent damage output. But if you're able to get on her first, this matchup really isn't that bad. Especially if the Vayne has, some sort of bad support. This matchup is completely and utterly even. This is probably the closest thing to an actual skill matchup that you get in terms of bot lane. Even though she does outrange you a little bit, she has no wave clear. She's not really able to pressure the wave to some of the worst matchups. She's not really a bully, and you can duel her. Even ultra late game Vayne that has randoms and whatnot isn't really that scary of a champion. She's very easy to deal with when you know how to catch her in her stealth, and most Vayne players only roll to one side. They don't really roll into you straight on, or they don't roll to the opposite side, so they're very easy to predict. So in my opinion, this matchup, it's even, it's dead even, and really not that bad. Now next up we have Vigor Bot Lane. Vigor Bot Lane is in unplayable tier. Even though you can W his Q and his R, he doesn't need them to kill you. All it takes is one single stun to absolutely drop you, and it forces you to take cleanse. In the time that it takes for your cleanse to come back up off of cooldown, Vigor will have access to 15 more cages, and if the Vigor is smart, he can run exhaust or teleport and swing XP into you. This matchup is terrible. One of the worst in the game, hands down. Basically, it doesn't matter what support he has. This is just a terrible, terrible matchup for Samira. Only real counterplay here is, of course, to W his R, but even still, that usually isn't enough, because if he stuns you, you're going to be dead regardless. He can full combo you before you can even W, so you're forced to run cleanse into him, and cleanse just simply isn't enough. Alrighty, now that we have Vigor, let's go ahead and talk about Xayah. This is an easy matchup. Even when Poke Xayah was super strong, it wasn't that scary. As long as you W her E, Xayah actually can't do anything. Xayah is something that doesn't she scales really well, but she needs to be able to duel the other AD carry. She can't duel Samira. This matchup is just like not Xayah favored whatsoever. You're able to W her ulti, you can W her E when she's calling the feathers back, you out trade her, you out DPS check her, you can force her ulti over and over and over again. Even if she has upper hand against you, you just exhaust her. This matchup is cake for Samira, one of the easiest matchups in the game, hands down, definitely in Smash tier. Alrighty, now that we talked about Xayah, let's go ahead and move on to Yasuo. Yasuo matchup is very hard. Yasuo matchup is definitely in the hard but winnable tier. If the Yasuo is good, this is unplayable. But most Yasuo players are actually pretty bad, so this goes in the hard tier. Yasuo, even though he is the melee, has some of the best wave clear tools in the entire game at level 1. You can't really get pressure against this champion. He is able to win wall you and prevent you from getting style stacks. He's able to win wall your ulti. And he's very scary because of his targetable EQ combo. If the Yasuo goes for a tornado or a Q3, you can simply W it and then it doesn't exist. But most smart Yasuo players won't do that, and they will EQ onto you and thus guarantee the knockup and then guarantee the ulti. Yasuo runs lethal tempo, so he gets the DPS check you. This matchup is definitely one of the harder ones, and it's like not even close. He pressures the wave insanely well. He has amazing all-in potential. He also runs exhaust. He is able to shut you down in team fights. The only weakness that this champion has is that he is a melee and he's unable to siege towers and thus not very good at securing a lead. So bot lane Yasuo is definitely on the harder end. This is one of the worst matchups, but thankfully not too many people play it. And then on top of that, he is a melee, so he is very susceptible to ganks. And now we have our last two, which are going to be Zerry and Ziggs. Zerry as a champ is anywhere on this tier list, basically. This champion can be incredibly easy to smash. He can be even, it can be a hard lane, or it can be an unplayable lane, depending on the skill of the Zerry. A good Zerry makes the lane very hard but winnable. A bad Zerry is a complete and utter smash. Most Zerrys sit in this even tier, and then a very, very good Zerry that knows how to make use of her range and knows that she can just like click her R whenever she has it and actually force a fight onto you, puts this into unplayable tier. This is one of the champions that I love counterpicking Samira with. Personally, when Samira's taken from me, I will pick Zerry because Zerry has lethal tempo. She has her ulti, which is absolutely insane for chasing down Samira and for spacing Samira. She steals your shield bow. She builds shield bow herself, so she's even harder to kill. And she is a hyperscaling late game champion where Samira, struggles the most. So if Zerry makes it to 3 items, this matchup is unplayable. You just simply lose the game. There's nothing that you can do. Her Q range is 825. This makes it like incredibly difficult to play into her. The way that Zerry's Q works is that it's an 825 range skill, but it also benefits from any of your attack range increases from like lethal tempo or like fire cannon and stuff like that. This will update the range. So Zerry's Q also gets an additional 25 range when you're running into her and a minus 25 range when you're running away from her, right? Because it does have a travel time. So Zerry has basically like 1000 range. Zerry has around like 1000 range with fully stacked lethal tempo. This is unplayable. This is like one of the worst matchups for sure when she's able to get there. But most Zerry players are really bad and they just play the champion because it's OP without actually understanding her. So this moves her down to even tier. You're able to force all in onto her very easily. Her E is on a longer cooldown, so you're able to actually go ahead and jump on her and force trades onto her nonstop. And it's really not that bad of a matchup because Zerry can't actually fight you in minion wave, right? So during lane phase, it's not that bad. Out of lane phase, it's miserable. If you ever get caught by Zerry in a side lane, you will die 1v1 100% of the time if the Zerry is halfway competent. This is one of the best Samira counterpicks when you play it correctly. Most people don't play it correctly, so it's usually an even matchup. It's like the Draven matchup. But Zerry as a champion is not as strong as Draven is at the baseline, right? So we're going to put Zerry right here on the even tier. And finally, last but not least, we have Ziggs. Ziggs matchup is terrible. This is one of the most unplayable lanes in the game if the Ziggs is smart. If the Ziggs is bad, then this is a smash. So two things make this matchup absolutely terrible. A smart Ziggs, when you start your all-in, will throw his E at his feet, and then he will throw his bomb at his feet too. His W, his satchel charge, and then he will throw his Q at you while he's flying away. This will deal like 60% of your HP, and then he will ult you, and then you are chunked out of lane. Congratulations. A bad Ziggs will permanently push into you and thus be able to get fought. Every single time he uses his Q, you could dash up. If he's bad, he will try to charge you instead of himself, so you can W that. If he doesn't use his E at his feet, then you have a chance to actually win the matchup, making it very easy. If you have an engaged support, it's very easy to engage on him. The only scary thing about him is that he can, of course, push you and take your plates and then one-shot your tower once it gets 3 plates off of it. But usually, this matchup really isn't that bad. I put this in Smash tier. If you're a smart player playing against a bad Ziggs, the matchup really isn't that bad. If the Ziggs is somewhat decent, this is unplayable. So this is anywhere from unplayable to Smash. We'll leave this in Smash because most Ziggs players, especially in lower elo, aren't that great. That basically concludes every bot lane marksman. There is one champion that I know everybody is asking about right now. If you are paying attention, that is Senna. Senna as an AD carry is something that is actually very easy for Samira to deal with. This is an even or Smash. But she doesn't really see plays in AD carry, so we are saving her for the support section of the video, which is coming up right now. So now that we have talked a little bit about the AD carries, let's go ahead and talk support matchups. Supports are very influential, of course, when they are playing into you, and this basically dictates like how you have to play the lane the vast majority of the time. Let's go ahead and start off with alphabetical order, just like we did in the previous section. And our first champion here is going to be Alistair. This matchup is terrible for Samira if the Alistair is halfway decent. Depending on what the Alistair has as his AD carry, he can WQ into you and then turn on his E and then immediately use his ulti the second your support tries to disable him and thus keep you stunned the entire time. Tenacity doesn't actually affect Alistair that much because his Q is a knock up. The only thing that it really affects is his E, which is a stun, and by the time that you have Tenacity, which is going to be later into the game, he will have already dismantled you in the early game. This support matchup is very hard for Samira to deal with. Alistair will W you off of his AD carry if you E in onto them. He will Q, flash, and then W you into tower if you ever have like a sizable push. He shuts you down with his point-click E if you try to like dash past him. This matchup is just terrible. One of the hardest matchups in the entire game to play with if the Alistair is decent. Definitely one of the most unplayable supports. Now, next up we have Amumu as our next support. This champion is kind of interesting with where he sits. I think that this is definitely in the even tier. Because Amumu is a full melee champion and you know he can only like Q in onto you, he's only scary like every 5 minutes. I had a game against an Amumu the other day where they actually like one lane against us, but because Amumu is an all-in champion, I was able to use him for resets later on, and I just like got to completely destroy his team because he was feeding me style. As long as I was able to stay away from his R, it's very easy to like get stacks off of him. It's very easy to reset off of him. He's a very committal champion, and he's actually pretty squishy to Samira once you have an item. This matchup during the lane phase isn't super unbearable. It's only really scary when he hits 6. You can spam kill him over and over and over again. Definitely an even tier because you can block his Q. And he's not really that scary during the lane phase. He doesn't do anything, right? He's a full melee who can only all-in you. You can poke him down. You can whittle him away and make him not so bad. Now, Ashe as a support is kind of interesting. So we have Ashe here, of course. It's definitely in the hard but winnable tier. As for Ashe support, she is still in this hard but winnable tier. A bad Ashe support is a Smash. A good Ashe support is hard but winnable. This champion is very oppressive because of her ranged AoE slows, like we talked about. Her W is on like a 4-second cooldown. If she ever catches you with one good W, it's going to force your W so you don't get slowed again, and then she can ulti you. She can hold on to her ulti. And Ashe at level 16, her ulti is a little bit lower cooldown than Samira's W, which is kind of terrible. So, you know, hyper late game, scary champion. In the early game, if she's bad and you're able to catch her out of position, easiest, freest lane known to man. But bad Ashe is definitely in the Smash tier. A good Ashe is definitely hard but winnable. Now, Bard and Blitzcrank will kind of sit in the same tier for me, and that is going to be in the Smash tier. These two champions both suck into Samira. They have one skill shot that you have to W. Blitzcrank is an all-in champion. As long as you don't get hooked, you just roll him over. It's like insanely easy matchup. Same goes for Bard. Bard is more annoying because he has his R, of course. But Blitz basically like doesn't do anything into Samira if you're able to wall his Q, and then you simply just, you know, poke him out of lane, you harass him out, you all in him, he can't like do anything. This champion is just like a joke into Samira, and it's one of the easiest lanes definitely. Now next up we have Brand. Brand support is something that is definitely in the even tier, I would say. If you're able to block his stun, it's really not that bad. Brand explodes if you ever get to touch him, but he also blows you up if you're not paying attention with your W. I don't think that this champ is really stand out in anything. He's, you know, high damage and he's annoying for sure, but it's really not that bad. So this is definitely in the even tier for me. This is just a like very uninteresting matchup. You simply just W his Q after you're ablaze, or you W his R and then you shut him down. Not really scary unless he gets a lead. So next up we have Braum. This is definitely in the hard but winnable tier. Braum, everything Braum does shuts you down. You're able to W his Q and his R, but his E and his point-click auto attack applying his passive makes this one of the scariest matchups in the game if he's played correctly. Braum matchup is definitely pretty damn hard, and thankfully Braum isn't played very often, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But this is one of the hardest matchups for sure. Fiddle support is actually getting popular in high elo. This is an even matchup. It's the same thing as Brand. I don't feel like one way or another about it. Samira, after the Fiddle update, can actually win wall his fear, so it's pretty easy to play. and because of that, it's not so bad. So you simply just all in him. When he starts draining, you walk out of it, and then you E back in. Fiddle can't really do anything if you have an engaged support. He just gets blown up. It's an even matchup for sure. Now we have Heimer as an AD carry and as a support. We kind of skipped him in the bot lane play rates, but for Heim AD and support, this is definitely in the hard but winnable page. You can W his grenade and his W and shut out all of his damage. But a smart Heimer is, of course, going to be playing on top of turrets, which will do a lot of DPS. This is not a really highly played matchup, but when you run into it, it's kind of scary. So just make sure that you watch out for this. Heimer is one of the stronger bot lane picks into Samira for sure. Now let's go ahead and talk about Janna. Janna matchup is even. It's pretty annoying. It can definitely be pretty annoying at times. The only thing that you can't really outplay from Janna, though, is her R. Janna is just very safe. She's very obnoxious. She can disengage you out of your R. She pokes you well, and if you ever get hit by a tornado, it's usually a death sentence, depending on the AD carry that she has. But overall, this is a pretty even matchup. You just don't get hit by tornadoes, and whenever she gets caught out, she just blows up. Karma is, in my opinion, one of the worst supports that you could pick into Samira, because she doesn't really do anything. She'll poke you, sure, and it's annoying, but she can't stop Samira. The only thing that's annoying about her is her W, and of course her Q poke during the lane phase. Really not that big of a deal, not that interesting of a matchup. Doesn't really do anything. She can try to run away from you, but you just hold on to your style until her shield's movement speed wears off, and then it's really not that bad. Now we have our next unplayable support, and this is going to be Leona. Leona is incredibly hard to kill. I would actually move her in front of Alistair in terms of what she's able to do against you. Leona has point-click CC that you can't stop. Her ulti is a non-projectile that she can use immediately after her Q, and then she can save her E to micro-stun you. This is a terrible matchup, especially if she just flashes on you and then QRs if the jungler ever comes, or if she takes Hex Flash. Really, really bad matchup. Probably one of the worst in the game. She's incredibly hard to kill. With the amount of Qs that she gets over the course of a fight, she can single-handedly stop you. And this is Leona is just so incredibly oppressive against Samira. The only weakness that she has is that you can poke her out, but depending on her AD carry, that might not be an option. So this is definitely an unplayable tier for me. So now that we talked about Leona, let's go ahead and talk about Lulu. Lulu as a champion is something that I think is actually an even tier, because you can win while Polymorph. Polymorph does actually have an animation. It is quite simple to block it. If you block her Q or if you block Polymorph, you are completely and utterly okay. If you're against an AD carry that runs Exhaust, you can run Cleanse in this matchup, and then you can use Cleanse on either Exhaust or Lulu's Polymorph. It's really not that big of a deal. This champ is really strong against Samira when she plays it correctly, but even in GM, people don't really play this matchup the greatest, so I think that this is a even matchup overall. You just simply W her W. Now that we've covered one of the cringe enchantresses, let's go ahead and move to another popular cringe bot lane pick, and that's going to be Lux Support. Lux Support is a smash. You would just blow her out every stage of game. If she ever gets caught, it's free kill. If you ever get stuck in a 1v2 situation, you can kill Lux first and thus kill the AD carry. Lux Support is a joke into Samira. You simply just W her bind or her E, and she can't do anything into you. Cake matchup. Really simple. Now we have Maokai. Maokai is in the hard but winnable tab, depending on how they play. If they play caster Maokai, it sucks. If they play an engaged Shirelia's Battlesong Maokai, it's actually pretty difficult. He shuts you down. He's able to put, saplings in bushes. If he's not detonating them constantly on the wave, then he's actually very oppressive, and his point-click CC is very strong into Samira. And our other unconventional support here is MF Support. MF Support is in the exact same tier. I think it's an even matchup. It's really not that... There's nothing really to say about it. It's really annoying, but that's about it. It's basically just an annoying, even matchup. Now we have Morgana. Morgana is a smash matchup. Samira just completely and utterly dismantles Morgana. If you don't get hit by a bind, it's completely cake. She doesn't do anything during the lane phase. Even if she puts Black Shield on her AD carry, you just kill the other person. This is a smashing matchup. Whenever I have Morgana in my game, I'm like, damn, okay, free win. Here we go. This is going to be an easy time. The only time it's really annoying is when she runs at you and, of course, turns on her R, but then you can simply E off of a creep to break the tether, and then you don't have to worry about it. Really easy matchup. Doesn't really have any insane, scary matchups. Not that big of a deal. Now we have Nami. Okay, this matchup can go two places. This can go into Smash, or this can go into unplayable tier after Alistair. And there are two reasons for this. Nami doesn't actually have to throw her Q at you until after you use your wall. And Nami has two ways to bait your wall. Or she has her Q and she has her ulti. So Nami's Q, if you get hit by it, is instant death. And Nami's ulti, if you get hit by it, is instant disengage. So when paired with the appropriate AD carry, Nami is actually one of the strongest supports into Samira. Electrocute Nami does too much damage. She will completely and utterly one-shot you by putting her E on her AD carry and still deal 700 damage. And if she ignites you, it's GG. She's taken over half your health without putting in any effort. However, most Nami players really suck. So because they suck, they'll be using their Q and their R at the same time, or they'll give these spells up for free without actually getting pressure. This moves this into Smash tier, right? Unplayable if the Nami is smart and knows how to layer her CC appropriately, because if she hits her R onto you, it's guaranteed Q. If she hits her Q onto you, it's guaranteed R. If she uses both of them at the same time, super easy matchup, but if she knows how to stagger them, unplayable, from the sheer amount of damage that she does and everything else that she provides. But usually, most Nami players suck, and they're very easy to kill once they get caught out. This is a super easy matchup, in my opinion, when the Nami player is bad, and then incredibly unplayable when the Nami player is good. Nautilus is one of my favorite supports to have. It is also one of my least favorite supports to face, and that is because he is just insanely strong against Samira. Point-click CC on his R, point-click CC on his passive, and then if he Rs you, it guarantees his Q, making this a very hard matchup. I would put this as probably one of the hardest hard but winnable matchups, personally. I will put this before Braum in terms of like how oppressive this is, but just under Alistair and Leona, because Nautilus is actually kind of squishy. It's very easy to pressure him out of the lane pre-6. He's very easy to poke down, and you can, of course, W his Q if he tries to max range hook you, making this matchup not so bad. Pantheon support is kind of making a resurgence, to be quite honest. Pantheon as a support champion is trash into Samira. This is a smash matchup. You exhaust him when he goes in, and then you just kill him. When he uses his E, you E through him. Piss easy matchup, insanely simple. Pyke is kind of in the same boat that Pantheon is. Everything that Pyke does, you can win wall. Even if he Qs you, you can wall his E. Sometimes it's kind of buggy depending on like where the Pyke ends up. The E will still hit you even if you're walling, but this is still a relatively easy matchup in my opinion. The only thing that makes this hard is your support. If your support is trash, then it's hard but winnable. If the Pyke player is being punished adequately, this is a very easy matchup. Rakan is definitely in the harder side of things. This champion is incredibly oppressive when played correctly. I would put him just under Braum in terms of like what he's able to do to you in the lane phase. He doesn't have a single projectile aside from his Q, which means that he's able to constantly engage on you. A smart Rakan will E to his ally R and then W onto you after he's hit you with the charm, so he has like 4 seconds of pure CC, and then he's very hard to kill. Insane amount of pressure. When the jungler comes down, it's an incredibly hard lane. Just very difficult to play overall. Rel is easy to deal with. Rel is very telegraphed. You can actually E through her W and make her engage miss every single time. As a champ, she just gets poked out very easily by Samira. Rel is in the Smash tier of things. She's like just above Karma. I would actually put her like... Rel matchup is easy, but if she gets ahead, I would put her like behind Lulu, I guess. I'd put this in like even tier. This champ, when you know how to play against it, is really easy to play against. She does like the same thing over and over and over again. All she does is engage. She has no pressure inside of the lane outside of that, and she's only really good at objective fights. With Samira, she's fantastic, but against Samira, she's not that great. Now we have Renata. Renata is definitely in the hard but winnable category. I would actually put Renata... I'd put Renata like over Rakan. Maybe, we'll put this. So, Renata can shut you down. Her Q and her R are very important for you to wall. It puts you in the same situation that the Nami matchup does, where if the Renata player is good, she won't use both of them, she'll just use one of them. Her W is one of the most annoying spells to play against in the entire game on a reset champ. So Renata is just like insanely impressive against Samira. She harasses you all the time. Whenever you try to trade back with her, she shields. If you jump on her, she Qs you. If you wall the Q, then she just ulties, and then you just get smashed. This matchup is insanely annoying, and I hate it personally. Very hard matchup, depending on what AD carry she has. Now, next up, we have probably one of my least favorite matchups in the entire game, and that is going to be Senna. Senna as an AD carry is terrible. She's an even tier. As a support, she is an S tier, unplayable. I would put her more unplayable than Leona, to be completely and utterly honest. This champion is one of the most insane counterpicks for Samira in the entire game, because nothing she does is a projectile aside from her W and her R, and she won't be using them until you already need to be peeling the damage from the AD carry. She harasses you for free. She will constantly make going for every CS hell. She hyperscales into an insane like vision control monstrosity. She shuts you out, gets permanent drakes, has global pressure, is constantly able to kill you whenever you step out of position, runs barrier or heal or annoying stuff, and while the AD carry runs exhaust, and every time you go for an all-in, she's DPS checks you. Senna is one of the worst support matchups in the entire game for Samira. I hate playing against this champion with every fiber of my being, but if the Senna player is bad, like most of them are, this is a smash matchup. So if she ever gets caught, you will blow her up. If the Senna player doesn't know how to play the lane, then it doesn't matter. But when the Senna player actually plays the lane appropriately, this is an unplayable matchup. Definitely one of the hardest matchups in the entire game, in my opinion, just because this champion is so completely and utterly tuned to just destroying low range, low sustain, non-engaged champions like Samira is in like the early game, right? So Senna dominates you in the early game. she dominates you mid-game, and if the game goes to late, she will definitely dominate you there. So definitely an unplayable tier for me, but for most people, I think that she sits right here in Smash tier. Now we have Seraphine Support. Seraphine Support does not have any of the issues that Seraphine AD Carry has. This is actually a Smash. This is a blot. This is one of the easier matchups in the game. Seraphine Support doesn't do like anything. Seraphine AD Carry, on the other hand, is right here after Neela, but Seraphine Support sucks. Easy matchup. You just W her R, and it's very simple. Shaco Support is another one of my least favorite matchups in the entire game. Thankfully, this isn't really common in the majority of games, but when this is common, Shaco sits right here, between Leona and Alistair. This is how bad this matchup is. It is terrible. There was a bug fix for Samira in, I think, 12.13, if I'm not mistaken, that removed Samira's ability to reset off of clones. So, the only reason that this matchup was playable is because you could kill the clone and get a reset. You cannot do that anymore. So, every single time you get stopped by Shaco's boxes, which is going to be quite common, you will simply not have a way to like get into the fight because you won't have an additional E, and then he will simply kill you. The amount of CC that he applies is far too high. You need to go Sweeper in this matchup. Sweeper sucks on AD carries, and on top of that, this champion just deals a whole lot of damage, and you will passively kill his clone with your ulti if you ever use your ulti. A smart Shaco will run his clone immediately into your ult, and while your ult's range is very slightly larger than his clone's explosion radius, most of the time, the clone won't actually be that low when it runs into your ulti circle, and thus, he will cancel your ulti and CC you, get a box underneath you, CC you again, and then you are disabled for upwards of 5+ seconds. This champion is pain to play against. I hate Pink Ward with every fiber of my being, and I refuse to play against Pink Ward Shaco or any other Shaco support. It's terrible, man. This is just worst matchup known to man when people play it correctly, and I hate Shaco with every fiber of my being. It's fucking terrible matchup, and I hate playing against it. Sona is Smash tier. This champion sucks in lane. She is very susceptible to basically every support that you are going to be picking. If she gets to scale, then this is definitely in the unplayable tier, but most of the time she's not able to scale, so she is in Smash tier. This is just piss easy matchup. You can W her R on reaction every single time. It has a pretty fast travel speed, but if you know what to look for, very easy to block. Just make sure that you are walling her empowered W power chord and her ulti, and then it's piss easy. Soraka is terrible matchup. This is one of the hard but winnable support matchups, definitely. Soraka is probably about Renata tier. I would say that she's a little bit more difficult to play against than Rakan. So Soraka hyperscales, she shuts you down. If she doesn't use her E, she's incredibly scary because she'll simply save it for when you start your E. Put her E pad down, like where you're E-ing currently, and then it will silence you and snare you 100% of the time. She can point-click stop your ulti, she can point-click stop you in teamfights, she can heal anybody that's about to go down. Her lane harass is really good, her poke's really good. Terrible matchup, one of the worst in the game. Definitely if it is a somewhat decent Soraka player. If the Soraka player is bad, then it's an even tier. It's not even in Smash tier because of just like how oppressive she is. Swain support is same exact spot in the tier list. Swain support is very hard but winnable. You just need to make sure that you're Wing his stuff appropriately. Now, next up we have another one of the unplayable matchups of bot lane, and that is going to be Tahm Kench. Thankfully, this champion is not played very often in low elo, but he is definitely in the unplayable tier. Tahm Kench sits right after Alistair in terms of like shutting you down. Tahm Kench is completely and utterly disgusting. He saves his AD carry. It's like reverse Kalista. He can solo kill you very easily. It's impossible to poke him out of lane. He gets to go Targon's items, which means that, you know, he gets to go execute items. He goes like steel shoulder guards or whatever. Aegis, whatever like tank item he wants to go, it doesn't really matter. He just gets to execute creeps, and he is just incredibly painful to play against. This is one of the worst matchups in the entire game, especially when paired with Senna. There is no beating this. There is no beating Senna Tahm Kench as Samira, one of the worst lanes in the entire game, just completely and utterly disgusting. Now we have Taric. So Taric in 12.15 is like the best support in the game. However, I think this matchup is even. This matchup is a non-issue to me because Taric is only strong against champions when he's able to stat check them and fight them in melee range, right? You don't let Taric fight you in melee range, I don't think that this matchup is bad. His stun is very easy to dodge. He's kind of useless in what he does. The only thing that's annoying about him is that you can't generate style when he is in his ulti, but because Samira is like an assassin AD carry, she can very easily force the ulti. I would put Taric as like the lowest end of like even tier. So that we have Fiddle here. I would put these two champions like this. I'd put Brand probably above Amumu, and then yeah. So this is like where I have this, and if we were to do an ordered tier list, Taric just is like a non-issue for Samira. You just walk away from him. This is like a RuneScape champion. He literally clicks on you and tries to PK you in Wildlands. It's really not that big of a deal. Not that great of a matchup. but it's also not horrendous. Thresh is on the even tier as well. Thresh is actually worse than Taric in like everything that he can do. I think I would put Thresh under Fiddle. Thresh is no sustain, no range, only has Q. Box is annoying, but you just kill him. It's annoying that he can save the AD carry, I guess, but like you just kill him. Like Thresh doesn't like do anything. You just W his Q. Very, very, very simple. Vel'Koz as a support is this is like even tier 2. I'd put him like behind Lulu. Vel'Koz support is very annoying. If he's a good Vel'Koz, then this is definitely like hard but winnable. But most Vel'Kozes suck, so they're about here. Very easy to kill him when he's out of position. Very easy to snowball game off of him. And this champion overall is just kind of a joke. You just W his E, and then he can't do anything. You W his Q, he can't do anything. If you all in him, he's just kind of trash. Xerath is like same thing. I'd put Xerath like behind Brand. Brand is like a little bit more annoying than Xerath because like Xerath actually has projectile CC, but like the difference between like Brand and Xerath is that Brand doesn't have to like push the wave. Xerath kind of has to push the wave because of how their skill shots work. Brand like blows up the entire area. Xerath like shoots his Q up the wave and then pushes the wave. This is a really easy matchup. It's an even matchup definitely. If you W his E, then you can just kill him every single time he messes up. You can force trades onto him nonstop, and it's really not that bad of a matchup. Very easy to like snowball the lane off of him. Now we have everybody's favorite Abomination, which is going to be Yuumi. This matchup is hard. So this is hard for 2 reasons. First and foremost, Yuumi goes Exhaust Ignite. Exhaust Ignite don't have to be used at the same time. Yuumi can exhaust you, force you to cleanse it, and then ignite you immediately after, and then you still have to deal with the AD carry's heal or a barrier or whatever they're running. This is actually absolutely terrible in the early game, depending on what AD carry she is with. If she's with Press the Attack Ezreal, this lane is terrible. If she's with something like Kaiser, this lane is just insanely easy. But usually Yuumi kind of sits in this hard but winnable tier. This is purely dictated by your support. If you get an enchanter into a Yuumi lane, you lose. If you get an engaged support into Yuumi lane, then you win. But this champ as a whole is just mad annoying to deal with. She's just insanely obnoxious. So you just have to like be sure that you're aware of what you need to be doing in the matchup in terms of like your 2v2, right? So if it's a strong 2v2 lane, then you generally want to run Exhaust. If it's a weaker 2v2 lane, then you want to run Cleanse. That way you're able to cleanse the double offensive summoners from Yuumi. Most Yuumi players suck, and they'll actually use both of their offensive summoners on you at once, which is very easy for you to cleanse, and thus you can win the lane. But usually this matchup is pretty difficult, especially if you have any sort of enchanter or something like that. Now we have Zilean. Zilean support is actually very hard for Samira to deal with. I would put this like behind Renata. I'd put this here. Zilean is very hard for Samira to punish, and if you don't have an engaged support, then the game is just incredibly hard. Zilean has a targetable 80% slow like very early on into the game, so he just slows you, throws one bomb on you, resets his bomb, and then waits to see what you're going to do, and then he'll throw the second bomb. You can of course wall the bomb, but Zilean hits a point where he can literally perma-stun you with a certain amount of ability haste, or perma-slow you, which is like mad annoying, and then his ulti of course allows him to mess up without actually dying. This is one of the worst matchups for sure, depending on how good the Zilean is. But, you know, this isn't in, like, unplayable tier. And then, last but not least, our final piece of the puzzle, we have Xayah. This champion sucks ass into Samira. She is complete and utter trash because you just W her E, and then your Q actually one-shots her plants for whatever reason. This is something that only started happening recently. I've been noticing this in my games. But Xayah is, like, trash into Samira. You just W her E, and then you E through to her, and then she'll drop her ulti, and then you can flash behind it, or you can flash out of it, or you can just walk away. Xayah doesn't have anything to actually like DPS check you. You kill all of her plants instantly, and she is just like free food for any engaged support that you have. If you have an enchanter, it's a little bit more difficult. I'd put this into like even, probably lowest end of even, but this champion is just trash into Samira overall. Just completely and utterly useless. Probably one of the worst champions in the game against Samira. Anyways, this was Unsung. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I will see you guys all in the next video.